Now about maybe 2 months ago, I did a video where I built a PC with my first ever YouTube paycheck, and it was based around an AMD 2400G. So I decided, I think it's about time to upgrade it. Now, in case you haven't seen that video yet, the budget for that build was around the cost of a fairly exotic cantaloupe. And what that meant is that I couldn't put a dedicated graphics card into that system. And then after having a look at the Amazon Prime sales, I thought that there's actually a couple of very good candidates for a cheap graphics card that you can pop into this PC to hopefully make a pretty big difference in performance. Now, the graphics card that I ended up going with is the AMD RX 570. It's the 4GB version. There is an 8GB variant of the card, but I think if you're going to spend that extra money, I think you should rather go for the RX 580 8GB. And as you'll see with the gaming results, this graphics card made a huge difference in performance. Now, the exact version of the graphics card I went with is the MSI Armor version of the RX 570, and I paid about the equivalent of $130 for the graphics card. Now, if you saw my Amazon Prime's Day video, you would have seen that there was a Sapphire version going for about $110, but that was in the US and the prices are a little bit different in Canada. But anyway, I think $130 for the amount of upgrade that we get when we get to the benchmarks is very, very reasonable. Now, it's a decent version of the graphics card. It's got a big enough cooler on it with 2 fans and 1 massive heat pipe running through it. Honestly, this cooler is better than a lot of much more powerful graphics cards have on them, so I think it should do fine. In regards to noise, it's fairly loud. But the temperatures aren't too bad, especially considering the fact that it's in a case that is quite airflow restricted. Now, unfortunately, the graphics card doesn't come with a backplate, but considering the fact that my case doesn't have a window in it anyway, I don't think it's the biggest deal. Now, if you're very new to PC building, the process of adding a graphics card to a system is quite straightforward. You just open up the case panel, you slot the graphics card into that PCI Express slot, you screw it down, and then you plug in the power cable if it needs one. And then the final and very important step is to have your cat investigate your job to see if you've done it properly. Now, before we get into the actual benchmarks, comparing the two systems, I just want to say that I think that the difference is going to be pretty massive. Not only because the graphics card is a lot more powerful than the GPU in the 2400G, but when you use the graphics card chip in the 2400G, it actually uses system memory as VRAM. So what this means is that when you just have 8 gigs in your system like I did because of my budget, you only actually have 6 gigs of system memory and then you have 2 gigs of VRAM, which kind of isn't enough for either of them. And that does affect the benchmarks quite a lot. So you'll see there's a massive difference between the two use cases. So let's have a look at the benchmarks. And as you can see, the difference is pretty massive. In some of these games, the 0.1% lows of the RX 570 was actually higher than the average frame rate that you got with the APU. Honestly, you more than double your frame rate in a lot of these cases. Now, I did test all of the esports titles at the same graphics settings, but for 2 of the games, just out of interest's sake, that are more visual effect safaris than actual competitive games, I did test them at different settings. So the first one was Far Cry, where I compared the low settings of the APU to high settings on the RX 570, and the RX 570 performed a lot better. And then when moving on to Tomb Raider, I also compared the low settings on the APU to medium settings on the RX 570, and again the RX 570 performs a lot better. Now, as you can see from these benchmarks, it makes a very big difference. I honestly think dropping in $120 or $30 graphics card into a system that uses a 2400G or a 2200G is actually one of the best price to performance upgrades you can make in a PC, full stop. And even with the graphics card in that system, the entire PC still costs less than the cost of an average purebred kitten. Or, if you want to put it in a less stupid way, it's about $500 for the entire system, all in. I think this kind of performance is really good. I mean, if you look at the more kind of like competitive titles like CSGO, Apex, I think, PUBG, all of these games at low settings, you're getting 144 frames per second gaming. You can get high refresh rate gaming in these games on a system that costs about $500. I think that's an amazing value for money, and I really love this PC setup. And with that, it kind of concludes this series of I bought a PC with my first ever YouTube paycheck. Let me know in the comment section below if you want me to do a similar video with the paycheck from that viral video, that like Wish video that I did a couple of weeks ago. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. And yeah, I think that brings me to the end of this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. You can go check out my Discord server, which I'll have in the link in the description below. Check out my Instagram, my Twitter, and all those things. And until the next video, thank you for watching. Bye bye.